Welcome to Marketing 4520, Marketing Channels and Strategic Partnerships. This course is really an opportune time that's relevant and timely to the world's marketplace, as well as the marketplace in our state and our nation. Why is it so important? Well, let's start out thinking a little bit about the key term, marketing. If you go back to the genesis of marketing, it actually started in distributive sciences. So if you remember pre-industrialization, much of our production took place on the farm and in faraway small villages and towns. We didn't have urbanization. As urbanization emerged, if you go back from the transition from the production era and the simultaneous emergence of factories and what we call the big city movement, we had to match moving populations with goods and services. So distribution became a key factor. And in fact, marketing was engendered in distributive sciences and the economics of moving supply and demand. Well, today when we talk about getting the right goods to the right people at the right time in the right form, it's a far more complex market because you have things like mobile apps and tablets and desktops. You still have telephone, you still have brick and mortar. You have a myriad of choices to obtain different goods and services, which we'll refer to in this course as market offerings. Because market offerings, it's hard to separate the good from the service. If you buy a car, you obviously inextricably are linked to the service or maintenance that goes along with making that vehicle run, and the gasoline that keeps you pumping, or electricity, depending on what type of vehicle you're driving, or some other method of transportation. So cast against this backdrop of an ever-changing marketplace, why even study this idea of marketing channels? Well, one thing that's a little bit different about marketing channels is you're a veritable expert, because marketing channels encompasses all marketing exchanges. That means between buyers and sellers. And every one of you has been a buyer of something, and most of you have sold something. So you've been involved in marketing exchanges since a very young age. So when we talk about this notion of why it's important, the first thing is you're a player in the system. And in fact, depending on your role set as a student, as an employee, as a consumer, the kinds of goods that you exchange, the kinds of ideas and services, they actually change with you at different stages of your life cycle. So keep that in mind, and keep in mind the fact that we have this dynamicism, and this dynamism that governs marketing channels is something that makes it very exciting. Let's face it, marketing channels on the surface doesn't sound like a sexy topic. But by the end of this semester, I think you'll garner an appreciation for why it is solely the most formidable component of garnering a competitive advantage for companies. And keep in your mind just the notion of Amazon.com and Alibaba.com and the interplay of brick and mortar and online, what we call offline and online marketing that impacts your life on a daily basis. Now, in the 21st century, you're availed to unprecedented number of choices, different products, different brands, and different places at different times, 24/7. Your expectations are ratcheted up again and again. So again, if you look at the real world, real-time notion of marketing, you can see the utmost importance for marketing organizations is to manage their marketing channels. So what are exactly marketing channels? The definition we're going to use are the ones that emerge from several editions of different books that I've written. So I've authored many books in the area in both the United States and abroad. But I want to encapsulate that definition into something that's very manageable and handleable for students. You know, it'll be a little different if you're talking about specialists in a particular area of marketing channels. So overall in this course, we use the following definition of marketing channels. We view marketing channels as the strategic management of resources. And when we talk about resources, they could be capital resources like money, they could be logistical resources, they could be people resources, all types of resources that we'll delve into. So it's the strategic management of resources that deliver value, okay, that deliver value. And we'll talk about how value-driven marketing is a big part of marketing channels, okay? And we do this in all market offerings. And by market offerings, we mean products, services, and all the ancillary components. It could be components of a product. It could be the logistics that underlie the distribution of getting goods from point A to point B in all marketing exchanges or exchange relationships. So to summarize, marketing channels is the strategic management of resources that deliver value in the flow of marketing offerings in all exchange relationships. Now, in this somewhat convoluted example here, it looks a little bit complex, but we're going to simplify it. If you think about any good, let's say we talk about the raw materials that go into the production of a product. We have raw material transport. That means, say we go to West Texas, which is a big producer, inland producer of the cotton that goes into fabrics. So that type of cotton has to be produced somewhere. So we have to harness that cotton. It may come from a farm. Or we may harness fruit that eventually becomes part of juices or food products, etc. So the first part is raw material transport. How do we get it from the point of production or sourcing? And we might source all different types of goods from different areas. It may be a farm, it may be a factory, it may be a mine. It could be all different types of locations, and they may not even be something that's geographically proximate. They could be in any part of the world. So for instance, we have to transport diamonds very often from places like South Africa, a major resource location for diamonds. And diamonds play a big role not only in that engagement ring or jewelry, but diamonds are also used in manufacturing processes as well. So raw material transport, that means getting it from the point where things start out in a very raw, very organic manner. And then they often have to go into some kind of process. So if we were talking about, in this example, jeans, we might take raw cotton and then they go through the threading process where they do a knitting process to create the denim fabric. You may not know this, but denim was actually invented in France as a fabric, popularized by a guy named Levi Strauss, made in America. Today, by the way, no Levi's are made in America. They're all made in factories worldwide. And even though it was popularized in America, much of our production is done in Asia and South America, and far more in Asia. And by the way, the number one producer and sourcing unit for all denim in the world, whether you're buying very high priced $300 a pair of jeans or jeans from the Gap or from Sears, almost all that fabric or the original denim thread actually comes from India. India is the number one producer of denim, and Ahmedabad is a major area where you'll find a lot of the denim sourcing. So a lot of the goods that go to Italy or go to the United States or go to China, the component parts come from India. So much of those goods, whether they're rolled goods or threading, take part in another country. They may take part in China as well, another producer, or Vietnam. Then we go into the manufacturing part. The manufacturing part is where they make units that eventually become a jean. And that means that we have transport in different areas, like from the point of cotton to the point of threading to the point of what's called rolled goods to piece goods. And those piece goods have different types of finishing on it. So then we go into the finishing. So you can see how the flow goes on something as simple as the pair of jeans you're wearing. And that might be all kinds of finishing. They may be putting them in a dryer with rocks to give that hard finish, that special stone wash, as we call it. There may be rivets on the jean that are put on, or zippers. There may be special cutting or ornamentation like embroidery that's done. So you can see all the different iterations it may go through and whether they're done in one finishing zone or they're actually outsourced to a number of different specialists. Even the dyeing process is one of those processes. So you have different color and tones of from blue jeans to black jeans to white jeans, etc. So finally they go to finished goods and transportation, and very often under something we'll learn about like JIT2, UPS or shipment company is located right on the premises of the manufacturer and they're shipped directly from line to lift. And by line to lift, it means it goes right to a truck. So they go from line to lift to load. And that may eventually go to ship. So a shipping container is quite common, and they're very often shipped from east, China, Vietnam, India, Bangladesh, west, because this is a big consumption market, but many of them are manufactured in different areas of the world. What that is a distribution channel. And the focus of much of what we talk about in this course is on what we call B2B, business to business. That means those processes before they get to the consumer. However, marketing channels encompasses several different types of exchanges, as we alluded to in the first slide. Business to business, often referred to as B2B, business to consumer or retailing, which I think you're familiar with because you're all consumers who buy things from different retailers, and C2C, which means that you may sell to somebody else, like through eBay or an online platform where consumers are trading or exchanging, whether it's barter or for money or something else. You may sell your car to another consumer like a neighbor, and that's a consumer to consumer. So you take on kind of the role of a retailer. It also involves retro logistics. And retro logistics is just a fancy term for how you return goods. So you may buy things and then you become the variable producer and putting things back into the marketplace. So many people buy things with the propensity to return them, and then we have to go through a whole nother cycle, which may go back to retailers or off-price retailers. They may be put back in a manufacturing process and reworked into another product, like in recycling. So it can be a very complex system if we start looking at it pictorially, but it's not really anything that you can't grasp if you start putting it in the context of everyday life. Sticking with our example of jeans, think about all the different choices you have or venues, retailing venues that you patronize. So you may patronize jeans through a big box like Target or Walmart. And in fact, your brand choices, which you learn a lot about in marketing, inevitably lead to your retail patronage behavior, because you may want jeans like the Gap. And where can you buy the Gap? Only at the Gap. You can get Old Navy at Old Navy. You can get Banana Republic at Banana Republic. So very often those specialty stores are the only places where those brands are available. So you could get it at department stores, which may offer a wide variety of different brands like Kenneth Cole to Prada, depending on the department store you go to, True Religion, Diesel. You know, some of the specialty stores are also featured in department stores, as well as department stores' own brand names. So JCPenney features Arizona jeans, which were once one of the leading brands of jeans in the US. So it shows you changes that are constantly happening in the marketplace. And you should start to get excited about marketing channels, because this is really the real world right now of what's happening, and it's changing every day. So the brands you wore 5 years ago and where you bought them have changed. There was a time when Circuit City was one of the largest big box electronics retailers in America. They no longer exist. And when I grew up, Radio Shack was the place to go for electronics. Radio Shack sold the very first computer. It's hard to believe since they've gone bankrupt. So today, we may go to Apple and Microsoft superstores. We may buy them online. So things are constantly changing. And I use the apparel marketplace because apparel and fashion tends to change at a much faster rate, what we call fast fashion. So you can even buy things in the aftermarket, like many of you may or may not know that TJX, which has TJ Maxx, is one of the largest retailers in the world, one of the most successful in the United States. It is the biggest in the United States of all apparel retailers. So an off-price retailer is actually outselling first-line retailers up through the year 2017, the latest data that we have. And when you go to off-price retailers like Ross Dress for Less or Stein Mart or outlet stores, now you're getting into a whole nother area of marketing channels and retailing. So the dimensions that we look at, it may effectuate the brands you buy, fit. You may go to a particular place because they fit you more. Maybe you go to a tall or big store because your build is much bigger, certainly taller than me. You might go for fashion, what fashion is most aligned with your values, attitudes, and lifestyles. And it might be a lifestyle choice in and of itself because you like to shop there. You may like the retail atmospherics. And pricing could be a factor that impacts where you end up getting the goods and services that you want. So as we move on, one of the things that I want to talk about is something that I think resonates with the area of marketing channels. It said, the greatest words ever written on the maps of human knowledge are terra incognita, which is Latin for unknown territory. So when I talk about the dynamics of 21st century marketing channels, we know that they're always changing. So Daniel Boorstin, the noted American author, Pulitzer Prize winner, and he was actually a communist, but he was the very first secretary of the U.S. Library of Congress as well, so you should get to know who he was. He was talking about this idea that the world is always changing, and we can't talk about marketing channels without appreciating the dynamics of market settings, because people's places and perspectives are characterized by many different elements of change. Time information exchange, okay? So our presumptions that people don't change or perspectives don't change, places don't change. To give you a great example, when I grew up, the big retailers of not just Macy's, but we had the Hecht companies, which no longer exist. Hutzler's, one of the big department stores in the East Coast. We had Sears as the #1 retailer in the world, displaced by Walmart, now displaced by Amazon, and so on and so forth. And Alibaba.com, based in China, is now outsells Amazon.com. So depending on the benchmarks we use, who's biggest and how we go about changing even the movement of goods. So 17.6% of all men's underwear used to be made in Central and South America. By far, that percentage has decreased to less than 5% because it's much cheaper to have the goods made in China, and transportation, the costs have come way down, it's way faster, so movement cycles are expedited by world-class transportation and logistics. So this course introduces you to the most important shifts in contemporary marketing that help forge a competitive advantage. So the unprecedented impact of the marketplace being globally connected through technology summarizes 3 important elements that you need to keep in mind that are going to govern our entire semester. One is the idea of technology. We're in a technology-enabled marketplace. As technologies change, so do marketing channels. Second, the market setting. We can not only talk to people real-time, real world using our mobile apps, but we can order goods real-time, real world. McDonald's is delivering. We can have McDonald's delivered to us, not just pizza. Virtually all the places we used to have to go out, we can have in our front door, including groceries. So the world is changing, and distributive processes or distribution is changing. So there's enormous transformation in our market offerings. So we can ask Alexis to go and order us something without even getting off our sofa today. Okay, so the personal assistant, that whole phenomenon didn't exist years ago. Okay, the idea that you have 450 channels streamed 24/7 gives you more choices. So just the distribution of entertainment and media arts is unprecedented. This is part of the excitement that underlies marketing channels. So traditionally, when we think about marketing channels, we were really just thinking about the physical distribution. We put something on a train, plane, truck, by air? How do we go about moving the physicality of goods in different lot sizes? But that's kind of an aged old way of thinking. The realities of technology-enabled marketing settings mean that we have a lot of different assortments. We can go to a big box warehouse club like Costco, BJ's, or Sam's, buying big lots, value conscious, as opposed to getting goods at Aldi, which has largely generic Aldi products, and Aldi owns Trader Joe's. Just to differentiate Trader Joe's from Aldi's, think about same company, both largely store brands, but their merchandising mix is very different. And the way they're able to do this is they're able to capture different cult followings of consumers based on technology. So today, Google and Amazon and all the places you buy from treat you as a set of consumer data points, and they're able to do predictive analytics, predicting what you're going to buy before you actually buy them. And that helps us reduce inventories and maximize efficiency in distribution processes. So we also have development of new mediums for delivery of value to customers. We don't just want goods and services, we buy total market offerings. We don't buy a car without knowing that it comes with a warranty, service dimensions, the ability to hit a button and let it park for us, different warning signals, reduced cost of maintenance, all types of things that are value-added dimensions. And it talks about the value-added part of our definition of marketing channels. We have the complexity of marketing channel systems. It's kind of interesting. Today, something like an acne treatment may be sold in vending machines, and they may also be sold in Sephora and Ulta, and they may also be sold in first-line specialty stores. And consider there's very different profit margins. So companies are operationalizing getting goods to different sets of target markets, and there may be different margins. Let's simplify this. If you've ever been at a concert or a football game or soccer or any sporting event, and let's say you're old enough to drink beer and you buy one, it's a very different distribution process and pricing if you buy it at the ballpark or at Jerry World or at AA Center than if you have to buy it from a convenience store or gas station, or if you buy it from a discount, beer distributor. All those different price points are part of the complexity and the myriad of choices that govern the movement of goods and services and capitalize on profit margins to different sets of customers, especially when we go in the back end of the channel, the B2B set of channel choices. And of course, we have an unprecedented number of choices, as I alluded to before. We don't just have Pepsi and Coke, we have a number of carbonated and non-carbonated beverages, and the emergence of new categories of all natural drinks, even kombucha. There used to be a couple of choices, now you see a dozen or 24 different choices. And what you pay for them, how often you drink them, or you may never drink them, all these different types of choices increase the complexity of marketing channels. So from the point of sourcing to the point of consumption, we're going to look at all the processes that encompass the 21st century marketing channel competitive environment. So one of the examples I like to give is the way we go about listening to music. So there was a time when music was available on radios. How many of you have a radio today? Okay. And then the primary source of getting different types of pre-recorded music started out with what we called LPs, which most of you know as a tool for rapping, but have reemerged in terms of popularity and are garnering more market share. So things are kind of coming around. But we saw that go from the phonograph or LP, phonographs played LPs in smaller units called 45s, and then the big thing was reel-to-reel, and then we emerged into cassette tapes. So they were small 4-tracks. We also had 8 tracks. My very first automobile had an 8-track player. Then we have 4-tracks or cassette players. Then we went to DVDs and CDs. Now we have the reemergence on virtual music that we download. There's no physicality to the product, but we still distribute that through a variety of different sources. It's kind of interesting because where we started with LPs are not just being scratched by rappers and for hip hop music, they're now being reintroduced as a product that's increasing in popularity among consumers. So the old record shops that closed down, now we see records being available in a variety of different retailers and online. So in looking at marketing channels, this is a diagram. How has this been displaced? You know, the idea of going from production to some intermediary like a distributor, and from a distributor, when you go to a retailer, and a retailer, the final consumer. Well, there's lots of ways to circumvent this. We take out a lot of the intermediaries with what's called disintermediation, where you buy direct from manufacturer or direct from distributor, where very often there's third-party agents, everybody from the Brown, UPS, and FedEx, to other third-party providers that are actually facilitating how you get goods and services, even like Grubhub, you know, or Uber, that are delivering products to you same day or within hours, okay, drones. So you can see the marketing channel system has changed, and much of those changes are because of new technology that emerged and allowed disintermediation, taking some of the middle out to go more direct, save cost, and also reduce inventories. So it maximizes our efficiency with inventory management. And we'll talk about these things throughout the course. So marketing utility is kind of the basic foundation of all marketing channels. And that's just the aggregate dimension of the consumer's total satisfaction with anything you buy, any market offering. So if we put it all together, like if you bought a car, if you're satisfied with the service, with the way it drives, with the color and everything, if you buy a suit, you like the fit, the fabric, the durability, you know, the color, the fashion or style you may or may not like. But that's the whole idea of this nexus between economic value and marketing value. And if we thought of a Venn diagram coming together, that nexus, or where they meet, is the marketing of supply and demand, where we match it up. And where supply meets demand, that's the consumer psychology. It's not just the economic function. It's not just a marketing function. It's trying to ideally suit a consumer or customer's values, attitudes, and lifestyles. It's business operational procedures. So it's trying to align those needs. And those needs are not just economic needs. There's psychological needs as well, and lifestyle needs. They could be operational needs of a particular company or system. Okay? So marketing is activity of institutions and processes for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large, because societal marketing is very important. So that's a definition offered by the American Marketing Association. And you can see how these value-laden exchanges are germane to the idea and ideation of marketing channels in the 21st century. Okay? So what are the 5 components of creating marketing utility? One is time. We want things yesterday. If you think about my very first computer, it didn't go fast enough. And the computer you have now, you complain about, but it's more than 10,000 times faster than the last generation of computers. Your phone, we're entering a 5G. Many of you are on 4G. 5G is being introduced in the United States in year 2018. So the speed of delivery, access, when things are open. So very often the 24/7 notion of being able to acquire goods and services, that's also an element of time. Is it in a form that you want? Let's say there's only 1 or 2 of you. Do you want to buy massive stuff from a warehouse or a big box in large quantities? Many foods will go bad by that time and you end up wasting it. So we put them in forms that are usable, and the utilization is maximized depending on your own lifestyle needs. That's at a consumer end. The same thing's true of manufacturing. Very often we want components just in time depending on different production cycles or demands, because there's fluctuations in demands and cycle times. Sometimes there are down periods because of currency or electricity, energy cost, and so forth. So with planned manufacturing, we may need components at different intervals of time. Even tires for industry are manufactured at certain periods during the year, and it has to do with go back to rubber plantation and going from rubber to refined form to when we expect them to hit market and new technologies in terms of treading. And by the way, there are many federal laws that govern in not just the United States, but virtually all over the world, what treading is allowed for different terrains and different climates, etc. So things become a little more complicated when you give it some critical thinking. We also talk about the notion of place, like where you buy things. And we talked a lot about this, but the whole idea of place is far more convoluted than it was in the days when I was a young boy and produce and milk used to be delivered by truck to my house. So I remember being able to drive on Mr. Stinchcomb's truck when he made produce deliveries in the neighborhood, or the milkman coming and delivering milk to our home. It's kind of interesting today that technology affords us those same products delivered to our doorstep, or if you have special Amazon service, they'll actually bring it into your home or into your refrigerator. So it's very fascinating. The older things get, the more they stay the same in many respects. Also the service dimensions that go along with that. So what kind of service expectations we have for procuring goods and services. Really important in between, at that intermediary level between production and the sale of goods and services to the final end user consumer. Those services are fundamental. They may be informational, they may be financial, they may be effectiveness reports. So there are all kinds of reporting standards that have to be adhered to, including accounting standards. Very often these are linked today, so you have a seamless flow of information from the point of sourcing to production, and that way we're able to move goods faster and meet real-time consumer needs. And finally, this whole idea of possession. How do we take possession of goods? Think about it. We think we're very advanced in the United States. Well, you may use Apple Pay, but Alipay, which is a product of Alibaba, is ubiquitous in China. Nobody carries cash or uses credit cards. Virtually the entire population is using their mobile phone to pay for everything, whether they use Alipay or WeChat, which is like WhatsApp or Line. They all have their own payment systems, and their competitive density within China is far greater than it is in the United States, where we still use checks to pay for things. By the way, most countries don't even use checks, so unless they're bank checks. So the idea of personal checks will become an antiquated form of payment or taking possession of goods. The idea of credit, all these things work in to the possession and creating marketing utility. So in this course, we'll talk about what's the value of time utility, what's the value of form utility, place utility, possession utility, and why is the aggregate of all these utilities important to delivering and creating value for the customer, okay? So if we take service utility and we take what's called service dominant logic, one of the topics we'll talk a lot about, it makes us rethink the paradigm or the model that we use to encapsulate what marketing is all about, that there's a service, an implicit service dimension to almost all goods and services in 21st century marketing. So increasingly today, goods are not totally produced, like the entire marketing channel doesn't start and finish in a proximate geographic location. We do a lot of outsourcing. In fact, most customer service is outsourced to places like Ireland and India, to the Philippines, to places like Ecuador, Colombia, depending on what the product or service is. So as we have more and more outsourcing, and by the way, India is the largest outsourced provider in the world. McKinsey estimates it not only to be the largest in the world, but increased by more than 250% over the next 5 years, between the years 2015 and 2020. So by the year 2020, India will outsource the world in terms of total volume of service and engineering know-how, etc. So I'm not going to go through our next slide, but I just want to talk about the dimensions that you need to be aware of, having to do with the transportation of goods, the flows of goods and services, service quality, and the whole service scope, and kind of this transformation. So we've gone to customer-driven delivery. We're now much more into this notion of this connectedness and this inseparable connectedness between who we buy from, between the buyer and the seller. We're almost on top of each other. We're sharing information. Customers are giving information. Sellers are giving information. We're sharing that information real time. We want to not meet customer expectations, but to be competitive, we have to exceed expectations all the time. Kind of interesting. If any of you go to Raising Cane's to get those chicken fingers or deep fried chicken tenders that they sell, the goal is to serve you in 2 minutes and 22 seconds, 222, from the time they drop the chicken. Think about it. You're getting it fresh, fried, crispy. Of course, their sauce is very famous, but their product depth is very limited. They sell very little, and yet they've built a cult following and one of the fastest growing in their the fried chicken tender space. So it's kind of interesting how something as simple as fried chicken has an entire science behind it to make sure that they're meeting and exceeding customer expectations. Anywhere, anytime, we talked about 24/7. So marketing channels, the strategic management of resources that deliver value in the flow of marketing offers and offerings and exchange relationships, involve a lot of different strategic dimensions that we'll cover throughout the course. And they include economic, demographic shifts, socio-political impacts, psychological impacts, that means the customer mindsets, as well as technology. So all of these you should be familiar with, and make sure that you review these in the slides. To summarize, if you look at marketing channels and our framework for the 21st century, there are 5 major issues that will govern the entire course and your comprehensive understanding of strategic marketing. One is the idea of virtualization. So like we talked about, we don't need any physicality for music. Most of our financial services, communications, media are through virtual delivery. We don't have any hard copy. So even papers that you submit are virtually delivered. This course can be virtually delivered. So you don't have to sit in a classroom and necessarily read a book in order to get knowledge, because knowledge is virtualized. We have agility, the ability to move with the marketplace at unprecedented speed. We have learning. We're constantly learning, and technologies are changing. So even the platforms for learning and teaching are changing every day. The platforms for paying for goods, for acquiring goods, constantly changing. Even the movement of goods. You may be familiar with Bell Helicopter, which now has a Uber taxi, for lack of a better term. So you'll be able to go from place to place via air using Uber. And it's doing that in cooperation with Bell, in a partnership with Uber and Bell Helicopter. Drones making deliveries for Amazon. These are all new technologies, and we're learning how to make them work, even driverless vehicles. They may not happen tomorrow, but many of the systems that go into that learning process are being operationalized in the marketplace today, even in the military. Many of the robotics that are used in the military are part of a learning process that have changed the way our defense systems are manufactured and operationalized. How we create value. What is valuable? Well, your generation may have a very different connotation of value than generations that preceded you, and certainly will be different than the next generations that follow you. So constantly, the whole notion of value is being redefined. And finally, the idea of sustainability, whether we're talking about energy or reusable products, it's part of that societal marketing that I alluded to earlier. So how do, in contemporary marketing channels, we use something called the marketing concept? You may remember that product, price, promotion, placement, or distribution all revolved around the nucleus of the customer in a way that delivers marketing mix decisions that are going to accomplish all those utilities. So you remember from marketing principles or foundations, product, price, promotion, and placement, and they all encircle this idea of the customer. Well, as the customer changes, so do to our marketing mix variables. We have to constantly change. For instance, as our demography changes, you see more and more Spanish language explanations on putting goods together and on instructions, whether you're in an airport or whether you're buying goods and services to use if you're DIY and going to Home Depot or Lowe's. Okay? So as the marketplace changes, we too are going to embrace these changes as part of understanding this big domain of marketing channels in the 21st century market. Thank you, and I look forward to a productive and rewarding semester.